I'd like to present to you today that the actions of the National Guard on May 4th, 1970 were justified at Kent State. The actions of the Guardsmen were influenced by the reality, or constructed around them by the society of young versus old that was going on in the 1960s. There are three main points that really forced these Guardsmen into the terrible position that caused them to fire upon and kill 4 students at Kent State. Those are the failure of civilian leadership, the poor use of military protocol and procedure, and the environment of hostility around them. For the failure of civilian leadership, Governor Rhodes and the mayor and the sheriff of Kent were responsible for really misusing their power and putting their own political interests before the interests of either the Guardsmen or the students or the public. The Guardsmen were called in long before they should have. The sheriff and local police, state police, should have been called in before the Guardsmen, but a preemptive call to the Guardsmen was put in by the governor, authorized by the governor and put in by the mayor and the sheriff, simply because of their own overreaction to the situation in Kent. The governor is also quoted as calling the students the worst people that America harbors, speaking with great hyperbolic speeches about these young people, calling them communists and brown shirts. They also spread rumors and perpetuated rumors about weapons on the campus, LSD in the water, weathermen on the campus, these kinds of things that really create an environment of fear. As far as the military procedure goes, leadership in the military advocated shooting of people cutting the fire hoses during the burning of the ROTC building, which, if you analyze the text of what the Guardsmen are supposed to do for their protocol, is completely outrageous. They also, the tear gas, the usage was ineffective, and they were told to switch their weapons before they should have been, and the Guardsmen that were called in were fired upon and tired, and there was no real reason for them to be called in. As far as the environment of hostility, the hatred of young versus old that I had mentioned was extremely prevalent in the society. If you analyze the videos that took place after the shootings of Kent that interview people on the streets, they were extremely supportive of the actions of the Guard, and it shows that the society around them was really kind of advocated this violent response, and that the Guardsmen, they don't exist in a vacuum. They've been raised with this kind of thing. They deal with it every day. The town of Kent was trashed by the students, which showed that they were willing to use violence, and they were also giving bomb threats, which shows that the students didn't really take seriously the kind of actions that could be taken against them while making that kind of claim. Thank you.
All right. You said that there was a poor command and poor leadership. Does this justify a shooting?
That's a far too simplistic way to look at the situation.
All right. Well, you also said that the tear gas was ineffective, correct?
Yes.
So, is it right to go straight to an M1 rifle after tear gas as a form of controlling the crowd?
No.
So, was there ever an official command for the shooting given?
It's not clear.
It's not clear, yes or no?
Well, I can't give a yes or no answer and be truthful.
No further questions, thank you.
Yes, communication and leadership at Kent were poor. But we cannot justify the events of May 4th, 1970, the death of 4 innocent students, by blaming poor leadership and poor communication. We must consider 3 significant points about May 4th of 1970. First, the Guard was not in danger. Second, the Guard had other means by which to deal with the rioters. And third, the Guard shot indiscriminately into a crowd without an order to do so. According to the Justice Department summary of the FBI report, a document was read to all guards prior to their involvement in the civil disturbance that occurred on May 4th, 1970. Its major points were: indiscriminate firing is forbidden. Only when a human life is threatened by the violent act of a rioter and no other method is successful in preventing death is shooting justified. Yes, rocks were thrown at the guard. The students were loud, screaming, shouting, chanting. They were protesting. They were acting on their First Amendment right to peaceably assemble. Shooting is only warranted if life is in danger. When the guard moved onto the football field, many students felt provoked. 300 feet separated the students from the guard. We know this from the documentary 13 Seconds. Alan Canfora's sister asked, if stone throwing was what the guards felt they had to protect themselves from, why didn't they shoot then? If you look at pictures of the event, photos in which students were moving away from the guardsmen, you might ask yourself the same question. National Guardsmen sign up to serve this country, to defend and to protect. This was one of the most politically divided times in the United States since the Civil War. Guardsmen were trained to deal with this political unrest. On May 4th, 1970, they failed in this endeavor. They went against their rules of engagement, fire only when a human life is threatened. Let's look at the second part of this document. The first part was shooting is only justified when human life is threatened by a violent act of a rioter. The second part, when no other method is successful in preventing death. When the guard went to Kent State, they went there with tear gas. When they went home, they still had tear gas with them. 67 shots, 13 seconds. The guard was not in danger. The guard had non-lethal weapons. The guard had no order to fire. For these reasons, today we resolve that the shootings at Kent State on May 4th, 1970 were anything but justified. Thank you.
You discussed the rules of engagement in your opening statements.
Yes.
So you've read the part of the rules of engagement that say when the Riot Act is read, it is illegal for any group larger than 3 people to remain together.
Yes.
And you've read the FBI report.
Yes.
So you're aware that the Riot Act was read not once, not twice, but 3 times on May 4th.
The Riot Act does not justify the individual action of pulling a
But
trigger.
the Riot Act was read.
Regardless.
But the Riot Act was
it
read.
does not justify the act of pulling a trigger.
But the Riot Act was read.
The Riot Act does not allow for indiscriminate firing.
The Riot Act doesn't allow for indiscriminate firing,
No,
but
it
it was
doesn't.
read, and it does allow for the guards to use whatever force necessary
In order to
disperse the
justify
crowd.
that this shooting was all right, you cannot say that the Riot Act was read leading to indiscriminate okay firing.
Well, I plan on justifying that using much more than just one question, but you can't
Well, the
agree with
Riot
me that
Act
the Riot Act
does
was
not.
read.
The Riot Act was read.
Yes, it was.